Okay, let's talk a little more about, let's answer Dennis's questions. Why did you join the Army, the 4th Cavalry, and Uncle Ken join the Navy?
Was that what he wanted to know?
Yeah, that's one of the questions.
Well, I joined the cavalry because I just saw the movie, The Day with the Boots On,
Okay.
and I talked Mr. Baker and Eddie Taylor and joined the cavalry with me. And he wanted to know about the numbers, serial numbers, and in those days, if you volunteered, which I did, your first number was always a 1. And if it was a 2, I think it was National Guard, and 3 was if you were drafted. That was your first number. So my number was 16, 15, 40, 67.
Wow.
Yeah, it was easy to remember. But I can't remember my Social Security number. But Uncle Ken, he had, what's her name, Judy right away. And I don't know if he had Dennis then or something, and so they wouldn't draft him yet because he had kids and he wanted to get in the service because I was in it. And he was that kind of a guy anyhow. He wanted to get in where the action was. And I was worried about it because I didn't want him to get in combat. He had kids. But he finally, so I don't know how he got in, but he finally got in the Navy.
And you were in 12th grade when you enlisted.
Somewhere, whatever.
You left school a month before graduation, right?
Yeah.
And then where'd you go for boot camp?
Fort Meade, South Dakota. It was there was no old Indian fort was our headquarters, and that's where we got tanks. They just came off of. That's how far behind we were. We thought we were going to get boots and breeches, have horses.
Uh-huh.
We were so behind in the war that they just had horses on the maneuvers. But they got tanks, so they just got tanks, and I don't know if they had them in Fort Meade, but I took my basic training there, and then we went to California. Desert training, that's where we got the tanks.
Okay.
Yeah, we went into tanks.
How long were you in California?
6 months. Only supposed to be there 3 months in the Mojave Desert because of the desert.
Uh-huh.
But they didn't, the war was winding down in Africa, and so they didn't know what to do with us. So we stayed out there 3 more months. But I was healthy there.
And then what happened?
We went to Texas, Paris, Texas, just to kill time until, and then they sent us over to England to get ready for the D-Day. The Russians were pushing us and everybody wanted D-Day. So I was in England for about 6 months, and then D-Day came. That's all.
And you were on a ship in...
That took us 14 days to get over there because we were crisscrossing. There was a lot of U-boat action, and the Krauts were...
Mm-hmm.
We used to see a lot of explosions and fire on the ocean, and I got seasick. It was terrible. It was on a British ship, and the food was... because all they had was lamb and all that. They didn't have good food. I think a lot of us got seasick on that because it took so long. That was not much fun.
And then you were D-Day plus how many days?
11.
And what was that like when you were in the...
Well, they still dumped us in the water. our tanks were all waterproof, had snorkels, so they could breathe coming out of the back end about 6 foot tall or something like that, because they dumped you in the water off the LST, landing ship tank. And so it's a good thing. A lot of people drowned in the tanks before that because of the excitement of the fighting. But with us, there was no fighting right there. It was took us about, when we landed, about 5 or 6 hours. They were inland, but about 10 miles by then, before we got in combat. My captain, the last thing he gave a talk on the ship over the channel, he said, he gave us a fighting thing. I don't know about you guys, but I'm coming back. And he was the first one killed. And Blue Jay used to they made fun of me because I said something about you have to have your head out, the tank commander, to see. Unless you're in actual combat, then you have to be buttoned down, but he was the tank commander, captain of our F troop. And he blew his friggin' head off.
Oh,
and
my.
Blue Jay and them wanted to know if it rolled outside the tank or inside, and I didn't think it was very funny.
No, it wouldn't be.
But I guess it was. That was it. It was kind of scary because we started hearing all this firing, heavy guns, and we're ready for combat, and here it was our own artillery. So we keep going, and now it's getting scary because we're going way past them. So you actually got in combat. So it was kind of scary at first. But that's it. End of that story.
So, what about your route? You know, what did you do? What direction did you go and all that?
Oh, we had to cut off this Cotentin Peninsula, so that our objective was to capture the port of Cherbourg, so Patton could land, because they had a port. The big tanks couldn't. Third Army couldn't get ashore. I was in the First Army. And we had to cut off this peninsula and capture Cherbourg, so Patton could land, and with all his photographers and so forth. Blood and guts. But that was it.
And then did you get into Germany or just France?
No, well, we got into Germany, and we landed in France, of course. Then we went through France and started getting in parts of Germany. And then it was winter time came, and so we paused, going to set up for the big push to Germany proper, to cross the Rhine River. So that's where we were. We were just sitting there waiting for spring, or the First Army and Third Army and that's when the bulge happened. And the Krauts took us all unprepared. We were just sitting there waiting. That's where the first time we didn't know what they were, but the Krauts had already perfected jet airplanes, and we didn't know what they were.
Oh.
It was overcast all the time. By that time, so there was no Air Force, American Air Force. So we thought they were buzz bombs going over to England, like they did all during the war for the poor Limeys. They sent all those buzz bombs all the time, and we thought that's what they were, but they were jets.
Oh.
And we didn't know what jets were, but we could hear them. We really thought they were these buzz bombs.
Uh-huh.
Till after the war, we found out they were. Here the Krauts all that bombing, they were still manufacturing to the end.
Wow.
Yeah. And they pushed us all the way almost to the back to the channel. Christmas Day, I think, the sun finally came out, and the American Air Force and the British started coming over to help stop them, because the airplanes and all that, they're the only ones that, except for the infantry, could stop these Tiger tanks. They were so big, these Tiger tanks. They had all this terrific armor, you couldn't hardly stop them. The infantry could with the bazookas, or the airplanes could
Uh-huh.
bomb. At Christmas Day, we started the offensive coming back, stopped them, start pushing them back. And that's once we got, and then we paused, we got them back into Germany, and our objective when I got nailed was Cologne, Germany. They had this Remagen Bridge. They made a movie of it after, I guess. And that was our objective, to capture that before the Krauts blew it up. And they did capture it, but I wasn't there.
What happened? How did you get injured? What happened?
Well, a heat shell hit us, HEAT, High Explosive Anti-Tank, it's called. The millisecond, when it hits the tank, it pierces the armor of the tank, and then it explodes when it gets in the tank. And that's why it's anti-tank, and it supposedly kills everybody in the tank, but I was the only one that got nailed.
And you were inside.
Yeah, I was the gunner, yeah.
And they pulled you out?
Yeah, I don't know if the chief, by that time we had 5-man crew. It was a bigger tank. And I don't know if he pulled me out or Sergeant Greenfield. And I laid out there all day because they were under fire, and Uncle Charlie, he thought I was dead, but they couldn't go get me. Finally, the medics finally got me. And that was it.
And they took you where?
Field hospital. And then and I don't remember, I can remember hearing people moaning, and this one guy kept talking about his feet hurt and all that. Here his legs had been blown off, but he said his feet hurt him. And he didn't realize that he lost his legs. I do remember that.
Did you know you were hurt bad, or?
Well, I knew I was hurt, but I couldn't tell. I was either doped up or, well, it was terrific concussion when that exploded inside of a closed turret. So I was kind of out of it, but I knew I got hit, but I didn't know anything until I got back in regular hospital. Then I snapped out of it.
And what had happened to you? Your neck?
Well,
Your head?
I got burnt, and I just got shrapnel, got me, and my hand and head got burnt, and I forget what all.
And what about your neck swelled up? Or what was that?
Oh yeah, my face, my cheek, and all that, because pieces of shrapnel got me, and I think might still be a little in my back. They didn't bother with that. But yeah, that's what it was.
And they didn't know what to do, and you said it was in the plane ride. Were you going to England and it popped?
Oh yeah, yeah. There was some shrapnel in my face, and it was swollen all it. So they kept going on the inside to puncture it, to relieve it. And first time I was ever on an airplane, I flew back to England, pressure of the plane had exploded my cheek and it never came back.
Wow.
Whatever happened, it was all over. And I don't know what happened, but it stopped that part. But they couldn't relieve it in the hospital. But I had a Coca-Cola in that hospital, cherry Coke. I had about 15 a day, I think. You could have all you wanted.
How long were you in the hospital then?
I don't know, quite a while. I really don't know. But the ride back was nice because I came back on a hospital ship. And it only took about 3 days going back.
Uh-huh. And did you land in New York City?
Yeah. Yeah, I saw the Statue of Liberty. That was probably the happiest day of my life at that time, anyhow.
And then how'd you get back to Michigan?
Well, they sent me out to Springfield, Missouri, I think it was, a hospital out there, and that's where I learned to inhale cigarettes.
Oh.
I was so bored, and I about passed out. I learned to inhale, and I didn't do it anymore. And then they gave me a 90-day sick leave. And I came home. Grandpa and Uncle, or Mr. Baker, met me at the Michigan Central.
Oh.
I didn't know Mr. Baker was home. I still don't know how he got home before me, but he did. And Grandpa was there with Mr. Baker at beautiful Michigan Central.
What was that like to come home?
Well, I kissed the ground somewhere. I don't know that I got out in New York. I think we flew right to Springfield. And I think I kissed the ground wherever I found it. That was the end of that.
Now, was Aunt Evelyn living at home with Grandma and Grandpa?
Yeah, she had baby Andrew. Yeah, that was exciting. And everybody was a hero. Mr. Moore came home. He got out. Well, the Americans, they got rid of the GIs pretty fast.
And then was Uncle Ken still in the Navy when you got it?
I stopped on the way from Springfield. I don't know how it happened, how I stopped at Great Lakes Naval Base in Chicago and hooked up with Uncle Ken. There he was. And I saw Bobby Feller, he was in the Navy, the great pitcher for the Indians. I got to see him there, and Uncle Ken. And everybody lived happily ever after.